Hey y'all, and welcome back to Joey's Booked. Today we are going to be talking about my 25 books for 2025.
Okay, ready, set, go.
Supplication, Once There Were Wolves, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, The Da Vinci Code, The Fifth Season, The Last Wish, Song of Achilles, Slewfoot, House of Leaves, Private Rights, I forgot which ones I said. Rosemary's Baby, Abitsu, I don't know how to say that one still without reading it. Whatever the manga one is. How We Named the Stars, the purple one with the name that I can't ever remember by the Vietnamese author, The Laws of the Sky.
Time.
These are going to be my 25 books for 2025. If you don't keep up with a lot of book content, basically this is a list of books that I plan on reading during 2025. Different people do this a different way. Some people pick books from last year. Some people pick just backlist books, which is what I have done. All of these are books I already had on my shelves and I've wanted to get to for a while. There are no new releases on this list. And the goal is to use this kind of as a way to push yourself to read and get through books either you're excited for or whatever. I am not going to be doing any kind of like unhaul challenge or anything like that because I know myself, and at some point, unless it's for a specific video, I'm going to end up mood reading. There's a chance some of these I may not get to. Clearly, there are a lot of books to get through, so we're going to go ahead and get started because I've got a lot of reading plans this year. To get us started, I originally had all of these organized by either genre or the reason that I'm picking the book or whatever else. And then I realized how big of a stack I had, which I only read 113 books in 2024, so this is like meant to be a fourth of my reading for the year, roughly. I originally was going to do this like either by genre or the reason that I picked it and have categories, and I started to do that. If this was not in a stack by size, it would be all over the place, and I already wasn't picking this up to take a thumbnail, so this is what we got. Going on to the books, my first book is a super backlist book for me. When I was making this list, I wanted to specifically pick books that I have owned for a long time before I even really started my big reading journey. 2021 is when I really started reading as regularly as I do, so it's only been a few years now. So this, basically I said any book that I've owned before 2020 was going to be considered like my really backlist books. Because at the time, if I bought books, it was because maybe I'd seen a movie or it was just something I'd heard a lot of people talk about, not really knowing my reading taste. This is one I've wanted to read for a long time. I loved this movie as a kid. I still haven't seen the Netflix adaptation. I don't know how I feel about that. But that's going to be Watership Down by Richard Adams. I loved this movie as a kid, and it's been so long since I've seen it. I don't remember a whole lot, but I know basically it's kind of like this fantasy-esque, I think it's environmental maybe? But it says on the back, a group of adventurers who desert their doomed city and venture forth against all odds on a quest for a new home, a sturdier future. But it's rabbits, so like there's definitely some environmental stuff going on. I'm really excited to finally pick this up this year. I have said I've wanted to read it for so long and like revisit the movie adaptations and everything else. At least been on my shelf since probably 2017 or 18. And I can't wait to finally pick it up. Also, I don't know why this one has red edges because I've seen the same edition in like used bookstores that are not red. So, and then a newer pickup. I just bought this toward the end of last year, but I also love to read translated works, and then I never pick them up. I was really upset at my number of translated books that I at least knew were translated at the end of last year. I wanted to make sure there was something translated on this list, and I also wanted to give myself grace with something a little shorter because this stack gets thicker as it goes. We're Safe When We're Not Alone by Ingyam Tran. Actually, no, this one isn't translated. This is from a Vietnamese author, and we are the perspective of a son, and it says, "Son has lived his entire life inside the mansion. He's a good child. He reads, practices piano, studies, and watches ghosts on the farmland through a window in the attic. When father decides it's time for son to venture outside, son's desire to please father overpowers his fear, and he must contend with questions he's never wanted to face. What are the relentlessly grinning ghosts hiding? Has a ghost taken control of father? What answers or horror lie in the forest?" So on. This debut inherits the haunted house tale, shaping it into a moving exploration of loss, coming of age in a collapsing world, in the battle between isolation and assimilation. This sounds like a real cool cultural study. I don't know if this is, I know it mentions haunted houses. I don't think this is actually horror, but I'm really excited. It should be a pretty quick short read. It's like 130 something pages, I think. I'm really excited to get into it, and I don't really know what's in store, but it's on the list. A for sure horror novella that I've been wanting to get to for a little bit now and has been making waves on BookTube again is The Laws of the Sky. This is by Gregory Cortaz. This one is translated, though. I know this has something to do with kids that are going camping. I think it's almost a little fairy tale horror-esque, and like some weird stuff starts to happen. I don't really know what all goes on. I'm trying not to read too much into it. I heard this is one that's really good if you go in a little more blind, but I do know there's like this camping fairy tale kind of aspect to it. It's another little short novella to kind of even out at around 150 pages, and I've heard great things about this one, and I can't wait to see just how weird it is. This book made waves last 2023. This was a huge book I heard all over the place. I really wanted to pick it up, and then I couldn't find it anywhere around me, like in an actual bookstore. So I finally broke and ordered it online, and then it just took me so long to get around to it, I never did. But this year is going to be the year that I finally read Any Band by Amber Tamblyn. This is about a female R-worder who has assaulted multiple men, kind of follows these different men who have been affected by this person, and it's really kind of making a statement on how that also does happen to men and like how it affects their lives. I don't remember anymore how much it actually follows her herself, or if it's just from the men who have been impacted, but I've heard that it's very deep, it's very dark, it's very triggering, and I tend to like those things in books, so I'm really curious to see how this is taken from, because it's from such a different perspective, not only of the men or the victims, but also it's written by a woman, which is the same critiques we see a lot of times on men writing women. So I'm kind of curious to when this is flipped, how that works as well. Like, there's just a lot of facets that I find interesting. A more modern classic for sure that everyone talks about that I've just never taken the time to pick up is going to be American Psycho by Brent Easton Ellis. I have heard so many things about how dark and messed up this book is. I've never seen the movie adaptation. I've know very little other than it's about a serial killer that's apparently very smart. I've heard it's very grim, it's very gruesome. Don't normally go towards slasher type things. Even in movies, they're not my favorite. Based off the things I've heard about this and just how big of a name this is in the horror community, I think it's finally time to pick up some more well-known horror. A 2024 release that I picked up and never got to because I started hearing some not so good reviews on it is Supplication by Noor Abinakul. This is supposed to be kind of real weird horror. I know from a lot of the reviewers I have heard talk about it that it's very pretentious writing, that a lot of them said were pretentious in not a so good way. I'm not gonna lie, a good portion of the reason I bought it is this gorgeous cover. I just love the artwork on this one. I do remember it sounded really interesting at the time. All it says on the back is, a thought had presented itself to me. One I was scared to think. I knew I had touched something I wasn't supposed to. Something that no one was supposed to touch. Now, I knew the impossible, terrible truth of things. I had stumbled into a room hidden behind a fake panel, where there lay something secret and obscure, the sight of which would irrevocably change the viewer. I'm not going to pretend to remember everything this was about, but I remember when I heard about it in 23, this was one of my most looked forward books and anticipated in 24, and I just didn't get to it. So this is going to be one of the few newer releases on this list. Another backlist one I've had for a few years, and I keep putting off and saying I'm going to read, and then I don't, and then I'm like, yeah, I want to read it, and then I'm like, I don't know, is going to have to be Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. And I am really intimidated by this book. This edition is close to 500 pages long, has very small font, and it's historical. I love Margaret Atwood's writing from what I have read from her. A few years ago, I read *Handmaid's Tale*, and then like 2 years ago, I read *The Testaments*, which was what it is. *The Handmaid's Tale* is just a phenomenal book in writing. And then I ended up with a bunch of McKay's credit at one point where I bought like 7 or 8 Margaret Atwood books, and I haven't picked any more up. And they've been sitting there for almost 2 years now. So I feel like it's time in 2025 to finally read more Atwood. I know I've got this one. I've got the Oryx and Crake series I really want to read. And then I've got Cat's Eye and maybe a few other shorter ones. This is one of them that I think I could enjoy the most. From what I remember, it's like a historical thing, and there's this woman. She's been convicted of murder, but I don't think she says she's done it, and there's like a sentence thing going on, and they're trying to figure out what actually happened, or was there mental illness? Was there something else? Was she just crazy? Like, what is going on? I know Netflix years ago did a limited series of this I'm also really interested in, and that's what put this one specifically on my radar. This is going to be the one on the 25 books because, 1, I didn't realize just how thin these pages were, and 2, it's the one I need a little bit more of a push to get to. Now, our stack is getting a little shorter. There are some series that I want to finally start. I didn't realize at the end of December just how many series I was finally continuing on in. But I did a series tracker and realized I haven't really started a lot of the series I own, and some of them I own the full series of books because I've just not had that focus in 24, and I normally love to binge a series as a whole. So we're going to start a few, and we are hoping to finally get into the 5th season by M.K. Jemisin. But this has something to do with like these people who have some kind of way to control the earth, and there's some environmental stuff or something happening. It's a fantasy series. There's 3 of these, and this is the first book. I've got all 3. And I've just heard such phenomenal things about these. I want to say that these are questionably in second person. I don't know if I feel about that or not, but I think I liked it a lot more when I read The Spear Cuts Through Water than I ever expected to, because I was scared of the second person in that. Now, that one had its own weird formatting with perspective. I'm really excited to get into these. I think I've read a short story or 2 by M.K. Jemisin in some short story collections, and they were alright, but I've heard fantastic things about the Broken Earth trilogy, and not only do I want to pick this up, hopefully I'll make my way through the series. Another fantasy series, the next series I want to finally start, instead of continuing to say I'm going to, is going to be The Witcher by Andrzej Sapkowski. Alright, so these are translated books in a 7-book series, similar to the TV show and video game. I played the 3rd Witcher video games years ago when I used to game more, and I don't know if I ever even beat it, but I loved it. I've only seen the first season of the TV show, just because I don't watch TV much anymore. But I do want to start on The Last Wish, which is one of the 2 short story books that are kind of prequel into the full series. It's the first one's published. I do have the box set because I love these white editions of the book, and I'm really excited to finally jump into Geralt's world. I'm gonna make a confession on the next book and say when I originally made my 25 list, the first iteration of it, I don't know that this is the book that I meant, but it's the book that I've landed on. The book's is Last Days by Brian Evanson. I have read 2 Brian Evanson short story collections in the past. I think this one is just a single story. But I found out, because I wasn't sure how I felt about this one because I think it's culty. I found out that these covers, he has 4 or 5 of them. Both of the ones I've read from him match the covers. And if you put all the covers together, they apparently make an image. And I think there's a couple that can be interchanged throughout of his books, which I did not know, and that made me want to get them more. So this is the one that I kept seeing at bookstores, so I eventually picked it up at some point. The reason I don't know if this is what I was going to originally read is I also have Last Days by Adam Neville, which is a author I've read twice from last year and liked to various extents. I think they were both kind of 3 stars, but I liked the concepts. I don't know which one I originally meant because I didn't put the author name down, and they were kind of beside each other at one point on my bookshelves. We're going to go with Evanson because it's shorter and it's been a little bit longer since I've read from him, and I needed probably a little bit of a push to pick up a cult book. A book that I have seen the movie of, and it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I've never seen the original, and unfortunately this cover is a movie tie-in cover, but I have seen the American one, and that is another translated book, which is Let the Right One In by John Avid Lindquist. I loved, growing up, the movie Let Me In. It's the old one that had Chloe Grace Moretz and whatever the kid from the 13 Reasons show is, Dylan, whatever his last name is. I loved that story. I've heard so many good things about the original work that I cannot wait to read. I don't know if it says what it's actually about on it, and I don't want to spoil that right away, but basically it's about this bullied kid, and he doesn't have any friends or anything like that. He's just heavily bullied, and he befriends this girl he meets, but this girl isn't everything she seems, and there's some supernatural stuff that this leads into. I've seen the American version of this movie so many times. I never watched the foreign one, which is what is on the cover. Even though I've been interested in it, I've heard there's some questionable material in that one. I do really, really want to finally pick this up. A bit of a wild card, because I don't read it very often, but I have enjoyed a few things, is I'm really trying to push some boundaries on my reading this year. For 2025, I've already started my first book of the year, and it's not what I thought it was when I started it, which I'll hopefully, if I don't find a way to fit that into a video, then I'll be talking about it in my wrap-up. I want to push my boundaries, and this isn't as big of a push because I've read a few things, but I decided to pick up a manga and put that on the list. I figured that would help maybe find something a little quicker to make this more achievable. And I got thinking about it, and I was like, there's not really many that I gravitate towards, even though I like horror. I've read a couple Junji Ito's, even though it's manhwa. I have been reading The Killing Stockings, and that's about. I've got maybe one other series I'm interested in, but I don't know if how I'm gonna go about that yet, because it's long and I don't want to buy that many. So I found a standalone at one point for cheap, and I have no clue really what this is, but it is Abitsu by Harita Ryo. Urban legend gothic horror. I don't really know much about it. I think it's about a ghost creature or something. I don't know. I don't read enough of this to really comment on a art style or anything. It is kind of thick because I usually, if I am going to buy something like this, I want it to be longer to be worth paying for. Not that the artwork, I recognize all of that, but it's just for my sake, because if not, I'll just feel like I'm going to fly through it and then spend the same amount of money that's going to give me a lot more time out of a book. And my library doesn't carry much of anything, but I did find this one for a couple bucks online. Not really sure what it's about, but I'm going to push myself to attempt another manga I'll probably finish it. Will I like it? That's the big question, because there's not been a whole lot that I'm just in love with. And then getting into more literary fiction, general fiction, contemporary, I don't really know the difference between the three. I did decide to pick up, or finally want to get to How We Name the Stars by Andreas in Orderica. How We Name the Stars, this is one that I really wanted to get to last year, and I almost picked up for one of my queer reading videos in June. This just didn't end up making the cut, and I really want to get to it this year. What I know about this is it involves obviously queer characters. I want to say he gets into this relationship in college with like a roommate or something, and then I think at some point someone dies. I don't know if it's the same person or not. And then Daniel goes back to his ancestral home in, I think, Mexico or wherever it's set in. Yeah, Mexico. And it's kind of like dealing with the grief, dealing with love, but it is queer in nature. I don't fully remember anymore what it's fully goes into. That seems to be a theme. If you don't notice, a lot of times I'll buy books off a synopsis that I hear about or a review, and then I wait until I forget what they're about because I enjoy them so much more not knowing anymore. I never buy them if it's not something I don't think I'm interested in. But this is a prime example of it's queer, it's grief related, I want to read it. Another classic that I wanted to get to this year is a horror, modern-ish classic. I don't really know where this falls, but it's going to be Rosemary's Baby by Year 11. I read The Stepford Wives last year and absolutely loved it. I've seen the old movie of Rosemary's Baby and really enjoyed it. Last year I even picked up Nestlings, which was heavenly. Related to this, every year I try to, in October, pick some kind of classic horror of some degree or big name horror that I want to read, unless I decide to pick this up sooner. Right now, this is what I want to make my October horror, like, classic for this year, even though it's a little bit more modern. In the past, I've done Dracula, I've done Frankenstein, and this past year, even though I missed the Halloween mark, I still read it in October, was The Haunting of Hill House. So I figured I'd go even a little more modern. I think this was 70s-ish. But Rosemary's Baby, if you are not familiar with it, is kind of a classic, modern classic. Follows a couple that have moved into a apartment. Basically, they've had a baby, and some weird things start going on in the apartment, especially involving the child, especially on the mother's end. I don't want to go into super detail because it's been a long time since I've seen an adaptation, so I don't remember the exact way it goes, and I don't remember exactly when the twist happened in, like, what spoiler or not. It is kind of a modern classic. I'm really excited to actually pick up the novelization, or not novelization, it's just the novel. It's a classic, it's inspired so many things, and I want to go back to the original material. Another 2024 release that I'm so upset that I did not get to, and I never got around to it. I have 2 copies of this book now, even though I haven't read it, because I was so anticipating this book in 2024, and then I found out that it released in Europe first. So I went ahead and went to Blackwell's and just ordered it, because if you don't know, Blackwell's is a great way to buy things from overseas and get regular shipping and not spend an arm and a leg on international cost. But I've used it a couple of times. I've got some special editions and stuff that way, that books that I wanted and hadn't read. But in this case, I just wanted the book and I wanted to read it right away, and then I didn't get to it. And then right after it came in, I got an art copy from the publisher of the American one. I have not read either of them yet because I did not get around to it, and even then, when I finally did receive the art, because it wasn't too long after, they sent it to me right before the release of the book, so it's not like I was rushing to get a review out. Private Rights by Julia Armfield. Julia Armfield has slowly been making her way as a favorite author of mine. She tends to write weird, queer horror and fiction, and she is the author of one of my all-time favorite books, Our Wives Under the Sea. And then last year, I read her debut, which was a set of short stories called Salt Slow, which was part of my queer author vlog. This one is supposed to be like post-apocalyptic. There are some kind of ancient rituals taking place at the same time. I'm not really sure what is going on exactly in it. Really, really excited to get to it because I love this author so much. I want to try to get into more indie authors this year. I follow a bunch on like Books of Horror and some other pages and stuff where people are able to promote. And I've gotten a couple of indie arcs that I read last year, like The Aching Plane and one or two others, but I haven't read a whole lot of indie stuff, and I want to support smaller authors. And from what I understand, this is horror or indie. I haven't really heard anyone talk about it outside of that space. And that's Faceless by Jeff Monday. This is like stories from a child. It says Anto heard the stories as a child. Mother would tell him to go to sleep, or the faceless would come for him. Years later, he discovers the faceless are not simply a story told to misbehaving children. They are real, shambling around, unable to hear or smell or see, unable to scream. And as horrifying as the faceless are, Antu soon finds there is something even worse. Ask a question, any question at all, I'll answer it and take your face in return. I don't know, but this cover is gorgeous and creepy. That just sounds really intriguing to me. There's a lot of spacing in between the pages, like in the text. So it looks like it's going to be a pretty quick, easy read. And I am excited to finally pick it up because I've been wanting to for like 2 years again. I wanted to add a short story collection by someone who has already become an all-time favorite author, and that is going to be The Beast You Are by Paul Tremblay. I pre-ordered this when it came out, and then I didn't pick up another Paul Tremblay for a minute until last year when I did my Third Time's a Try and finally read Horror Movie. I just want to continue to pick up everything he publishes. I have this. I still need to read The Pallbearers Club. I've got The Little Sleep, Growing Things, Survivor Song are all on my shelves. And then I think there's a few more I need to get. I've yet to read one I don't enjoy to some degree. I've never given one below a 3-star. I know that much for sure. And if I could get just like one more 4 or 5-star, I think it would solidify him as one of my best ratings to consistently give an author as well. I'm a bit nervous because short stories are not always my favorite things to read, but I felt like that was the perfect motivation of putting this on my list to read one of the collections instead. Another book that I am really scared of picking up, and that's Slewfoot by Brahm, and I have wanted to get to this for so long. This is another October book that it just feels like belongs during the autumnal season. I've heard so many good things about Brahm. I have both this and The Lost Gods, and I've not picked either of them up. This one, we are following Abatha, and she, I think, has been like shunned from her community for some reason. They either think she's a witch or something. And then I think she meets like a demon or a creature or something, and like it's kind of like female empowerment and stuff. But the reason I'm so scared to read this is I think this is set during Puritan times. And to me, that is one of the most, or the least interesting settings possible. And that's the same kind of reason with the Alias Grey stuff. I don't remember if it's like 1700s colonization or if it's also Puritan, but those settings terrify me to read about because anytime I've seen it in movies and stuff, it is such a slog. But I've heard so many fantastics. I've heard it's not super hard to read. I know Brahm is known for his artwork. Fingers crossed this works better for me than I think it's going to. As the books get thicker, typically they get more intimidating for me. But I don't think there is anything more intimidating to pick up than the book that is becoming my new sign here. I'm gonna read that, I don't pick it up. I'm gonna read that, I don't pick it up. I have about 2 books like that now. One of them is not on this list, but I would also like to get to next year, and it's a fantasy. But this is the true terror for me. But I'm so excited to read this after something I read in December. And I'm gonna finally, hopefully, pick up House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. This is the book I feel like probably doesn't need much of an introduction if you are familiar with horror, but House of Leaves is this weird, complex, experimental book something to do with a guy in a haunted house where the rooms just continue to grow or something. And then it has like mixed media stuff in it. And then it also has some of the most terrifying formatting imaginable in the book. Because sometimes you'll have pages that have hardly any text on them. And then sometimes you'll have pages that have weird formatting on the text, like this. I am very, very intimidated by everything in this book, but I am really excited if this is anything like We Used to Live Here by Mark Cleve, which I was told was like an intro level to this, and I loved it a lot more than I thought. So even though I was already excited about it, I am more excited than ever to finally pick this up. Pushing my limits a little bit is a little bit more on the romancy kind of side, which I don't mind a romance in a story. I don't like when the main part of what's going on is a romance. For example, say I am reading a big epic fantasy. I am fine if there is like plot lines of romance and stuff like that going on. I don't care. I don't like it if it's more of like a romantasy where it's all about the romance and then there's just other things going on, and that's the forefront. But I am taking a chance, and I'm also taking a chance on a Greek mythological retelling, which I don't really have much experience with. I used to like mythology when I was younger. I don't remember much of it anymore because I never got like heavy into it. But I do think I'm going to finally pick up The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I have rotated this and Circe back and forth on my anticipated read shelf, and I think this was on my... Either this or Circe was on my list from back in June. I never got to either of them. At some point, I switched them out. I do have this edition that I just randomly picked up at one point. It's like the collector's edition. I think it's signed. It has the sprayed edges. I've never even read it. I think because this one is more queer, I am going to be more into it and interested in it. And I don't know, maybe I'll like it. I think it's going to be one of those things. If I was more familiar with the mythology, I probably wouldn't. But we're going to give it a shot and push our limits. Another book that's going to push my limits a little bit, mostly because I don't know what genre this actually is because I've heard it described so many ways. I've seen this hit a few spots on BookTube in the last year or two, but I really am intrigued by the author, and I don't know why. But I think I'm going to finally pick it up, and hopefully it hits the thrillery side that I hear that it sometimes does. And that's Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. I know it's something about this researcher or something, and biologist goes to the highlands to study gray wolves and like reintroduce them to the environment. But then there's like some other things that start going on as well. I think we get some of her past. We get whatever's going on in this town. I'm not fully sure exactly what's going on, but it doesn't look super long. And I've heard that this author is an amazing writer. I've heard really good things on migrations. I know she has a new one coming out next year. So I'm hoping that I can get to this. If I really like it, I want to maybe attempt some of her other stuff. Continuing on the theme of pushing our boundaries. Last year, I picked up, I think it was after Camera Stuff died, I picked up an S.A. Cosby thriller. I started trying to read more thrillers at the end of last year because I had Razorblade Tears, which is one that the queer aspect and stuff really kind of caught my attention on. So I thought that was very much like action movie, high action kind of stuff, which normally I'm not super into. Like, I'm not big on like super action movies or anything like that, even though I used to like some of the superhero stuff. But like as soon as it gets into like more war or crime and stuff, normally it loses me. But I really loved that book and the layers that were in it. So this year I found this just a few days before putting this list together. I found a nice copy of All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby, and I think I'm going to give it a chance. I don't know anything about this one, actually. I think I used to. I know it's probably going to take commentary on, like, African American and, like, what it is to be black. It says a black sheriff, a serial killer, a small town ready to combust. So something about a black sheriff, and there's murders that have gone on. I want to go in pretty blind on this one because I feel like I'll intimidate myself into worrying that it's all going to be like a big crime thing, that kind of thing, or detective book. And I would rather not know because I don't also usually like detective books. Another book that was on my anticipated read list for a long time that I never got to. I think it's a mystery or a thriller that I've been interested in. It's a book of the month pick from almost 2 years ago now. And that is Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. I've heard quite a few people. I know Ashley's Little Library has really been talking up Angie Kim lately. I know there's been another person or two. Basically, my audiobook never came in for this one in time because this one was a little bit longer. And since I've been reading in tandem a lot lately with both audio and physical, I really wanted to do audio on this since especially with anything that's like over 300 pages, it helps me keep going with my pace. This covers a situation where there's this girl, and I want to say it's like her dad's gone missing, and the only person who knows anything about it is her younger nonverbal brother, who I believe he has autism. It may be something else. And like they're trying to figure out kind of like what happened to the dad because he's nonverbal. And I know there's like commentary on being, I believe, Korean American. There's commentary on, of course, autism or whatever disability it is that the brother has, and a lot of other things. I've heard a really, really good thing about this, and I've heard good things about Miracle Creek by the same author. So it's finally time to get to this, get another chunker off my shelves, and hopefully it's as good as everyone says. This list is 25 for 2025. I've accidentally put myself into the position of making it 26 because, as we have seen, I don't always keep up with exactly what a book is about or whatever else because I like to forget. Well, apparently, on one of my other really, really backlist books, I thought it was the first in a series. It's a sequel, and I never realized that. I already wrote it in my 25 journal, and I refused to cross it out. So I guess we're just going to make it a goal to either get through both books in this series, or if I DNF the first one, then it's just shot. Selected The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. I have what I now know are 3 of a 5-book series, because I have book 1, which is Angels and Demons, which I thought was a prequel, technically tacked onto this list because I thought it was a prequel. It's not. It's just the first book. Da Vinci Code is apparently a sequel. They were independent books, or in the case of Angels and Demon, individual. And I also have Infernal, which is like book 4. So like I don't even own all the books. They're puzzly, detective-y things I normally hate. So I genuinely will be surprised if I make it all the way to the Da Vinci Code. I wouldn't be surprised if I DNF Angels and Demons, but I want them off my shelves if I'm not going to love them. And I have a few other books that are really backlist books. And these are 3 books sitting on the shelf that I could make room for things I'm going to enjoy instead. But if I've had them this long and I haven't managed to unhaul them, I might as well give them a shot. Because I don't like to unhaul things I've spent money on. And when I say I spent money, I spent 3 books on this at a flea market in like 2018. But we're going to give it a shot. Hopefully we make it to this one. The final book, if you don't know me personally, this is a strange choice. If you knew me 3 years ago when I bought this book or got it as a present, this makes complete sense. We're going for a nonfiction, which I don't read a lot of. It's not a typical nonfiction. My last book is going to be Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat by Sareem Nosrat. I love Samin. I think she's hilarious. I have seen the adaptation, the Netflix documentary of this. And this is the Mastering the Elements of Good Cooking. I don't have a lot of time since I've started the job that I'm at to cook a lot. But I love cooking. But it felt wrong just to put a regular cookbook, a reading list like this. But this isn't just like recipes. This is a whole, if you can see this, non-fiction book over cooking. and like how things work together. And yes, there's pictures and things, but like there's also some really dense passages. So it's not all just recipes. It breaks things down into the 4 categories of salt, fat, acid, and heat. And the way that I dork out every time I open this book to see if I'm going to finally pick it up is ridiculous. One of my favorite things, I don't know why, I love the concept of the different shapes of salt. And like how different types of salt have like different shapes. I know there's a picture in here somewhere. We're going to dork out for a minute at the end of this video. But like the artwork in here is just absolutely phenomenal. I don't know where the salt pictures are. It makes me kind of sad. I give up. But, oh yeah, there it is. Like, look how gorgeous this is. This belongs in a picture frame with the different shapes of salt. Yeah, we're putting this on our 25 of 25. And we are going to finally read a giant nonfiction book that's all about cooking. And I am so excited for it. I have no clue where this is going to fit in a TBR. I have no clue what this is going to have to do with anything, but I really want to get back into cooking more this year and being more experimental in my cooking. So what better way to do it than to read about it? At the end of this long video with multiple crashes, we have finally reached the end of the 25 books I want to read in 2025. I am so excited and pretty terrified of this giant stack of books. There's so many things I've wanted to get to for a long time, and I just have more books than I can ever really get to. So I want to make this a challenge to really push myself to get to the things I want to read. Will all of these fit into a reading vlog of some kind? Who knows? But I'm really excited. If you have made it to this far in the video, thank you so much. Please, if you haven't, give a like down below, and then maybe subscribe if you want to keep seeing more content from me. I'm really looking forward to 25. I'm really excited for a new year and a fresh start, both with reading and other things in life, and I really hope to see you along the way. Down below, let me know what's a book that you're really excited about for this new year. Thank you again as always, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.